Recording. Kia ora koutou, Kofi Graham Takawengoa. I'm the academic lead at the Rehabilitation Teaching and Research Unit in the Department of Medicine, University of Otago, Wellington, and together with Rochelle Martin and our wider team, we teach a range of postgraduate interprofessional coursework papers on interprofessional rehabilitation. And we also provide supervision in master's thesis through to PhD. And so tonight's session is intended to give you an overview of thinking about a coursework pathway, right through from your initial postgraduate papers through to PhD, and stopping anywhere along the way that you want to. So do put some questions. This session is being recorded and it will be put on our YouTube channel for the next 12 months as people approach us throughout the year with a seeking advice. So you might like to use the Q&A tab, which is under your More buttons, rather than the chat function, which is disabled for you tonight. So I have a few slides. The slides, if you would like a copy of the slides sent to you specifically, you're welcome to email rtru@otago.ac.nz at any time, and our administrator will send you a copy of the PowerPoint so that you can, scroll through it and go back for details, or you can watch that recording again and extract it from there, whatever is most convenient for you. So sharing slides, righty-ho. Let's whip through. So this is who we are as a team, the RTRU. We are a small but incredibly dynamic team of lecturers and researchers in rehabilitation in New Zealand. So we each specialise in different aspects of rehabilitation and actively contribute to the international research and discourse in best practice interprofessional rehabilitation.
Faye, we can't see your slides.
Oh, it's thank you. I thought that I hadn't shared it. What's happening here, Hadley? Because it's showing that it's sharing at my end. Oh no, it's not. It's down there. This one.
There we go.
Now we can. Sorry, team. So as I was saying, small, dynamic, international researchers and specialists. So we have a wide range of courses, papers available, and by papers in New Zealand, we mean a single postgraduate course or unit of study. It's the most basic, smallest unit of study. So all of our papers are worth 30 points on the New Zealand university points system, education points system. So the number of points in a paper at Otago University is the same as of the same weight or value as points at any institution in New Zealand. All educational institutions in New Zealand use the same points system. We also have different levels of study, which usually refer to the year of the postgraduate study, and that or study including undergraduate, and that that level system is also universal across institutions in New Zealand, which means that it is quite easy to move from one institution to another to continue on your studies if you feel like a different place is a better fit, or you particularly like a specialist topic that's being covered at one institution or other. So that's a really nice system that somebody worked out some years ago, so that there's a bit more fluidity and you're not locked into any one institution. So you can see there's a range of topics, and if you go to the RTRU website, you will find the paper schedule, it's called, which tells you when each of these papers are running. So they usually run once every year or every 2 years, and you might want to know which semester it's running so that you can plan your studies. I've got there special attention to 2 papers. So the Rehabilitation Principles paper there is being taught currently by Professor Jean Hay-Smith. That's our core paper. So with any qualification postgraduate qualification with us, you need to have done the rehabilitation principles paper, whether that's postgraduate certificate, diploma, or master's. Once you get further along your postgraduate journey if you're thinking of moving towards potentially a master's, and often people don't even know the answer to that until quite late, till they're just about to start. You need to have done a research methods paper in order to start a master's. And we don't teach them within our unit, but there are a number of papers options, which I'll talk to in a few more slides, that you can choose from at Otago, or you could choose a research methods paper from another institution. So as I alluded to, we offer qualifications which are made up of papers at a certificate level, postgraduate certificate, diploma, or master's level. So the papers you take contribute to each of those qualifications. We use a staircase approach in the RTRU, as we do in many of the departments across the University of Otago, where you can, I kind of use the phrase, you can cash in the lower level qualification in order to add it to a higher level qualification, which is a nice way to be able to take your postgraduate study in bite-sized pieces and be able to get it on your CV even after you've only done 2 papers, for example. You can also enroll directly into a master's as well, and just go straight from your bachelor's degree and enroll boom into a master's by coursework. I'll talk that through a little bit more. So a postgraduate certificate is made up of 60 points in total. So if you were to start your studies with the RTRU, this would be 2 30-point papers. Postgraduate diploma is made up of 4 30-point papers, so you can use those 2 papers from your postgraduate certificate and then add on another 2 papers, remember, and so on from there. Now let's go to the next slide so you can see how this gets built up. So drawing from any of those papers that I showed you on the previous slide, your postgraduate certificate will comprise the rehabilitation principles paper and 1 other paper. And you can choose any of these papers that you like that relate to your specialty area of interest. The postgraduate diploma, you will, again, building on what you did in your certificate, then you add a further 2 papers. Now, technically, you can choose any 2 papers that you like, as long as they relate to, broadly speaking, to rehabilitation. So one of those papers could even be not an RTRU paper. It could be from another department or even institution. Just bear in mind that not all institutions break up their papers as 30 points. It varies around the country, and sometimes it even varies within Otago. Usually in Otago, they're either 15 or 30-point papers, so you can add up 2 15-point papers to make 1 30-point paper. The points are supposed to refer to the number of hours. So 1 point refers to 10 hours of study. So the idea is that a 30-point paper is equivalent to 300 hours of study. That's always an estimate. Some people take longer to read things than others, etc., and write, but that's the kind of broad rule that we're working from nationally. So if you do use a paper from another institution, then just have a look and see what those points are. You might end up with a few extra points, like a quarter of a paper's extra points. If you have studied elsewhere, you certainly can't end up with less points. So remember, it's about the number of points, not the number of papers. So 60 points for the certificate, 120 points for a postgraduate diploma, and so on. There are some other options if you want to cross-credit more than 1 paper and not do rehabilitation principles. There are other options for you. So you could gain a postgraduate diploma but not endorsed in rehabilitation, which is the extra bit on the title that you get through studying through the RTRU. So if it's really important that your qualification includes the word rehabilitation, you do need to follow the formula with us that is on this slide here. But if you're not attached to it saying rehabilitation, for example, that's not going to matter for the career pathway that you're heading down, then there are broader titles for diplomas and masters that you might be able to draw from. Any questions or comments at this point, Rochelle? Everyone's in rapt attention.
Yeah, no questions at this stage.
Right, and here's the link for the timetable that I mentioned a moment ago. Now, in terms of research methods paper, as I said before, we don't teach them in the RTRU, but there are a range of options available. So here are some of the paper codes that are a good match for the RTRU student pathway. So most of our students, the most popular paper in terms of research methods that our students take is the aviation medicine, so AVME 785. It's just in one semester. People with study with us are used to doing things, getting it all finished in one semester. You might also be interested in HASC 417, both excellent papers. The other papers that are listed here have specific focuses. So 506 is taught through the physio school and is primarily designed for physios, although they do take other students. And the nursing paper 415, that's only for nurses and it's on campus in Christchurch. And psychological medicine also do a paper that's focusing on mental health scenarios, also only in Christchurch. And public health has a range of papers, and I didn't bother listing them all there. They have about 7 or 8 papers that relate to research methods. They're all broken into 15-point bite size, and they take half of a semester in length to complete. So do go and check those out. If you just Google Research Methods Otago, you will find the relevant papers, but you can also email us at rtru@otago.ac.nz and we will email through to you the current list as best as we know it. We do check it regularly, but it also does change. It is a sort of an area, a space of movement at the moment, so things are changing a little bit. So this, as I said before, it is essential that this paper has been done for masters and PhDs. So that's why we recommend to people that they do it within their postgraduate diploma. Yeah, within one of those 4 papers. So here, so that's a recommendation. You don't have to. And sometimes people go, oh, no, I was just really interested in the content and I wanted to do neuro and I wanted to do peds, the peds paper. And now, you know what, I really want to do a master's, but, oh, whoops, I haven't done the research methods paper. You still can continue on, but you will need to enroll in another 30-point paper and have that as an extra number of points. And, you know, it's about $3,000 per paper. So that's worth thinking about for many of us as well. Rochelle, if you think of any questions that you've heard commonly asked, just jump out and ask me as well, even if it's not in the chat. So you've completed your postgraduate diploma and you think, oh, I just love this postgraduate study business. I'm just like in my element. I want more. Then you can move on to a master's. There are 2 ways that a master's can be done. You can do a master's by thesis, which is probably the more widely known. I don't know if that's fair to say, but you notice the number of points goes up. It in fact doubles. So a master's is twice the size of a diploma, which is twice the size of a certificate. A master's thesis is 40,000 words, just to give you an idea of scope and scale. And it can be done either 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time. Most of our students are working full-time or 4 days a week. And in that case, you would really want to do it 2 years part-time. You will end up compromising your academic grades or your mental health if you try to do a master's full-time and work more than 1 to 2 days a week. It is a bit of a sprint when you do it 1 year full-time. There's quite a lot of structure within a master's and a PhD. So if you're someone that looks at that idea and goes, whoa, that looks like a whole lot of words, I wouldn't know where to start, I'm not going to do that. I'd encourage you to just have a talk to somebody, because it actually is broken down into some pretty clear steps and milestones. You have one-on-one coaching, mentoring with a supervisor, in fact, two supervisors throughout the time that you're enrolled, giving you individual mentoring, supporting you toward achieving your thesis on time. But it's not for everyone to do a thesis. Rochelle, sorry.
Oh, it's just there's a question in the question and answer when you're finished talking about theses, just around whether polytech papers can be cross-credited.
They sure can. So polytech papers, if they're postgraduate papers, they are equivalent in standing to a university paper, and that goes across all institutions in New Zealand. So they're described in levels. So just look to see, it'll probably say a 700 level paper on your academic transcript and the printout of your study results. And that's what we're looking for, is postgraduate equivalence.
Yeah. And the paper, Rachel, that you've talked about is trauma-informed care, and that's a really, really relevant paper to have linked into a rehabilitation diploma or certificate, if that's the case. Yeah.
As you'll be aware, rehabilitation is a really broad church. It's a really wide field, and the students who study with us are generally people who are fairly focused or already in their area of passion. So some, for example, might have a pathway of study that's focusing on addictions, mental health, for example. Rehabilitation Principles 701 is still really relevant, because within that paper, and most of our papers, Rochelle's neurology paper, neurological rehabilitation paper, students pursue their own specific area of interest within the papers. So the assignments are designed in such a way that you kind of design your own assignment in a way within guidelines for each assignment. We have people that are specialists in splinting, or specialists in coaching caregivers, community stroke rehabilitation, massage therapists. We also have people who have no health professional qualification and are having a career change, or are interested in moving into advocacy related to rehabilitation. So
or
all
people
sorts
with lived experience
Mhm.
of disability or long-term health conditions that want to learn a bit more as well.
Move into a research degree, for example. Yes. So long answer to a short question. Thank you, Rachel. So your other option with a master's is to undertake a master's by coursework. So this involves only 60-point dissertation, which must be 20,000 words, actually. 20,000 words, that's right. And also two additional coursework papers. So going back to that list of paper options that we had before, you can choose from those, or you could bring in one or two papers from another area, such as your Polytech trauma-informed care paper, for example. So you might find that you're able to use papers that you've done in previous qualifications, or you've started toward your postgraduate. Usually at the diploma level is when we're bringing in papers from other courses, but we pay a lot of attention to the fact that many people in our area have to take a significant career break or study break, either because of children, and certainly in the last few years we've had COVID. So papers that are, 10 or 15 might be getting a bit of a stretch, but 10 or 15 years ago, if you did a postgraduate paper, we would be interested in talking with you about putting that towards a qualification with us and finishing it off with some current papers now. In particular, if you've continued to work part-time or full-time in the field, doesn't matter if you had a year or two break some time ago and then you went back part-time. We very much recognise that is about honouring that study that you've done and that continued involvement in the field is part of addressing equity issues for women and people with disabilities, actually, for that matter. So you've built up your postgraduate coursework profile there. The thing that the university is looking to see is that you have done a coherent body of study. So if that was around trauma and mental health, or around children and families with disabilities, that's fine. And nurses, for example, often come to us after they've taken or had to take some quite maybe quite impairment-focused nursing specialty papers, but they're really wanting to round it out with the clinical area and a more interprofessional focus to finish their qualifications. So that would be considered a coherent body of knowledge. If you've got your other postgraduate was in, I don't know, building bridges and everything I'm thinking of, like, I don't know, Greek history or something like that. I mean, even that might have had a disability slant on it. Like, just about everything could kind of almost be argued, depending on your focus. But yeah, there's probably some things that would not count as a coherent body of study, so German language or something like that. So the dissertation is usually done 1 year part-time by our students. So remember, if you could do it in 1 semester full time, and sometimes people are on a complete mission to get through those qualifications to, get into a career opportunity that requires it. But it would be quite the sprint. You wouldn't be doing much else on that semester, and just because of the different steps, they kind of take time, and you have to sometimes wait for other people back to you, or participants to be recruited and that sort of thing. If you still haven't had enough of us in a postgraduate study, you might be interested in enrolling in a PhD. So these are 80 to 100,000 words, 3 years full-time, or 6 years part-time. And that's always a thesis at Otago. There are some institutions, I think the University of Canterbury now offers PhD by coursework. So that's another model as well. If you are interested, and so it's worth thinking about what kind of work am I interested in moving into. If you're interested in moving into project planning, policy type work, then it is quite helpful to have, if you've done a thesis, that really demonstrates your ability to manage quite large documents, a large multi-phase project. You're essentially managing your research team as the PhD student, and that sort of thing. So they might like to see a little bit more autonomy and independent. You are doing an apprenticeship in research when you do a PhD, but more independent research than someone who's followed lots of short courses. If you're interested in doing a PhD, you think maybe if it's easier to be enrolled in the PhD if you have done a master's by thesis rather than a master's by coursework. Now, it's not a can't do if you change your mind in the future, but they might be looking for your publication of something from your coursework, or some other evidence that you've had some experience of a large project and managing a project before. So that's the university's attempt, really, to set you up for success. And if working together with the staff at the RTAU, will help you to shape up a case around that. So on to the money. Oh, that's what I wanted to just say. There is the opportunity to, if you have enrolled in a master's by thesis, it is possible to start that and then 6 or 12 months in, decide, actually, you know what, I'd like to just go straight to a PhD. I'd like to make this a PhD rather than finish this and start again. A lot of people think, hell no, I want to finish this and get it finished. But for other people, it can feel, sometimes it fits the project and sometimes it's about fitting the purpose, the person, sorry. And so you'd negotiate that with your supervisor, but there is a way that you can do that. So you can start a master's and upgrade it to a PhD. So in terms of funding, I always wonder, is this what everyone actually came for, is the funding bit? But in terms of funding options, this is in my experience of over a decade now in postgraduate education, of what some of your options are. So, and I'm talking to the New Zealand context, if we have some international guests, it relates to the New Zealand situation. So there are no scholarships for, well, there are no Otago scholarships for postgraduate certificates and diploma. There are a couple of some specialty scholarships that you're really going into your community, whether it's around your ethnicity or around some special lodge or trust or something that you're involved in, or church or charity that might fund it. But it's very unusual to get funding for your postgraduate certificates and diplomas. So if you didn't already know, I might as well tell you now that it's about $3,000 per paper at the University of Otago. We honestly provide exemplary supervision, support, and coursework education that absolutely sets you up for a research project and clinical career. Our graduates go on regularly. Regularly, we would have, 3 of our graduates receive national awards, for example. Many of our graduates receive scholarships, which are highly competitive. So, it's partly there's really amazing people out there, but I really do back what we offer in terms of our postgraduate training and skill development. Rochelle could probably talk to this better than me, because she went right through the RTRU and then got a job with us right from the certificate level, whereas I did my studies overseas.
Yeah, I mean, I like Fee said, I started by doing one paper because I was a little bit bored at work and wanted a bit of stimulation, and thought, what can I do? Decided to do one paper just to see what I thought. Got the bug, just carried on. My employer helped partially funded at that point. It was a charitable organisation. They partially funded me to do some of those postgraduate papers, so the certificate and then the diploma. So I was really fortunate to have a bit of support, but a lot of it was self-funded as well. And then I decided to go on and do my master's, and once again, that was partially funded by an employer and partially funded by me. And then I ended up doing a PhD that an organisation wanted some work done. The New Zealand Writing for the Disabled Association wanted the program evaluated, and so they set up a PhD scholarship. And so I got a scholarship through a specific project that came up. And I would echo what Fee was saying, though, in terms of the quality of the postgrad support. And it's not just us saying that. We get a lot of feedback from students to say that we help them to feel, especially for those that are coming new into studying, we gave them lots of support to feel more confident. We provided a lot of sort of wraparound support to sort of help them understand the processes. We're very approachable. We're available by phone and email and online to one-on-one to support students. So certainly that's the feedback that we've been getting, is how helpful the vibe is of the RTRU, particularly for those who are getting back into studying after having not done it for a little while. So, and the other thing we get lots of feedback about is flexibility, recognizing people have really complicated, busy, complex lives, and then being flexible with people to sort of ensure that they can succeed in terms of what we expect of them. So, yeah, like Fee said, the feedback that we get is certainly very positive.
But you might not want to believe us, and if you wanted to, you're welcome to look at our thesis students currently enrolled and recent students on our website, and drop them an email and ask for their opinion. Right. So funding, yes, as I said, so funding is not so common, but people regularly do get funded by their employers, like Rochelle's experience. There are still DHBs in New Zealand, or what were formerly known as DHBs, that fund students in their coursework studies. It varies a little bit around the country. Waitemata, for example, is a DHB that recently has supported funding, and I think Counties Manukau as some examples. And in the past, I won't mention some of the other examples because those are the ones that have done it recently that might be a little bit more worth pursuing. But do ask around, don't assume. And honestly, if you're getting absolutely zero love from your employer, then, consider other options, your other employment options, I mean, if this is something that's important to you. And if you do have funding available through your employer for coursework or master's study, then absolutely take it up, because it's not so common now. And sometimes I think people don't realise what they have in front of them. And as I said, the other options tend to be associations and charities. Many of those funding options will expect a part payment from yourself. Yes, you are becoming a better employee, and yes, you are contributing to society, but you are also personally gaining from it in terms of your own career options. So I think part payment is a reasonable expectations. I've put a bit of a timeline there, but if you're thinking of studying, say, at the start of next year, around about August would be when you'd want to start having conversations with your manager around what some of the options are, and weaving it into your CASP plans or their current iteration within the public health system, for example, or whatever your performance appraisal and development system is with you. The other thing to consider is if your employer is willing to give you in-work time to do your studies, well, that's equivalent to cash, really. That really does make it significantly easier. The other things that students do, even at a single paper level in their postgraduate certificate, all of our assignments are applied pieces of work that you will be able to pick up and use and share with your team. Involve your team in doing. So they're products that you will use in your industry, whatever that is. As we said, you create assessment items that relate to you and your purposes. So sometimes students take that and they say, this is the assignment outline. We're going to need to undertake a clinical audit, or I'm going to need to do a business case for a new service, for example. What would be a useful topic for you? This is a conversation with the manager that would justify me doing it in work time. So maybe not following your passion project, but doing something that's really current locally and going to be used, and is going to negotiate you some in work time to do it, is worth pursuing. So these are some of the ways that people get around the sort of financial side of it.
I answered a question a bit too quickly, but Dana said, yes, I'm with Counties Manukau, and they're offering to fund me the paper Motivation and Behaviour Change. So I think it is, just talk to different your employers. It is sometimes, if you don't ask and you don't, say, well, this aligns with my learning goals, etc., then you won't get. But yeah, it is worth having conversations.
It's often actually quite hidden. So definitely ask around and ask people that have been through some postgraduate study where they got some funding. Often there's a little trust or a bequest by somebody in their will that is quite local and quite specific and profession specific and that sort of thing. Those are places to look. Okay, if there's no more questions here, I might just move on a little bit to scholarship opportunities. Rochelle, because you're here tonight, I'm just going to we said a little bit about the community, Rochelle, but did you want to add anything from this with this slide?
Yeah, I'm just quickly reading it. Yeah, so I've had a really positive experience with PhD, my master's and my PhD, and I'm really well supported. What I particularly enjoyed is the interdisciplinary aspect of the team that you often end up. So your supervisory team can have really different perspectives that are really complementary, and it really enlarged my view of who I was as a clinician. So I was a physiotherapist, I am a physiotherapist, registered physio, and helped me to sort of, think more broadly. What I love about rehabilitation is it's very much about how we work together to support a person within their family and social context to engage in a process of whether it's recovery or living well or flourishing over time. And so learning how to do that in a team environment is just in lots of different ways is a real strength. And so joining that sort of community of thinkers and doers and change makers is really, really important. And that, I think how I would describe it is I found my tribe, sort of people that I kind of loved having conversations with. Conversations were stimulating, but also I really sensed a passion in the people that I was studying with and then learning from in terms of what does a really good outcome mean for people who are receiving rehabilitation. So that was really fantastic. And then the other, the University of Otago, you've got your papers and your supervision and stuff, but they also offer so many other options for learning, like how to manage long documents on Word, which I use all the time in my everyday life, how to do project management, good writing skills, how to present. There's lots of opportunities for other learning associated, which is really useful for all of life, really. So really positive, and you couldn't recommend it more, really.
So, Rochelle, now I just wanted to draw your attention to this point here that Rochelle made around that 90% of our students publish in the peer-reviewed literature. This is quite significant in terms of your building your CV for future research funding, including PhDs. So they don't tend to publish from their coursework, although sometimes that does happen. But certainly from a master's thesis, students would publish at least one paper. I think the record is 3, but that's pretty unusual. And it does depend a bit on the project and the student. Those publications, by the time you finished your master's, then you're more attractive for funding for PhD. And by the time you finish your PhD, it wouldn't be uncommon for our students to have about 6 publications. Sometimes it's the 6 months after they submitted the thesis that they then do a lot of that write-up into papers, publications, I mean. And that puts them in a really good position for postdoctoral scholarships to continue doing some research as a clinician. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So scholarships at the master's and the PhD level, one of the most common ways that people get those scholarships is by through the University of Otago. If anybody wants me to say more about publication, doing it by publication or thesis, I can talk about that a bit later, but that's a little bit of a specialty point. So scholarships at Otago. The University of Otago offers, I think, it's on the next slide, I think, I'm going to say 55 at the moment, 55 scholarships across the university. That's at the PhD level. So whether you've done your master's by coursework or by thesis, you are eligible for scholarships. There is a scholarships office, and check out their webpage that contains all the information you want to know about scholarships. They also curate information about scholarships that are available all around New Zealand that an Otago student could apply for. But there are some specific scholarships that are provided by the University of Otago. There are specific categories for Māori and Pacific Islander in terms of addressing the historic and current inequities of Māori and Pacific Islanders. So they get additional support and preference around scholarships. They don't, you can be enrolled part-time or full-time and still be eligible for a scholarship. Again, thinking about equity in particular, say for women and caregiving. And to gain, if you have a grade between an A and an A+, also, more specifically, a GPA, a grade point average of 8. Now, if you don't know what your grade point average is, it is written on your academic transcript that you received with your last qualification or your last thing that you completed, postgraduate thing that you completed. If you have a GPA of 8, you're pretty hot stuff. You're somebody who, on your average, you didn't receive a grade less than an A. If this was you in your last full-time year of study, you are guaranteed an Otago scholarship. So all you do is tick a box when you go to enroll and you will be awarded the scholarship. It is actually more competitive to get a master's scholarship than it is to get a PhD scholarship. I'll say that one more time. It is more competitive to get a master's scholarship than it is to get a PhD scholarship because more people want to do masters than the crazies like Rochelle that move on to a PhD. So the GPA for masters is, for PhD is only 7.5, which means you might have had a couple of A minuses in your last full-time year of study. So if you did 30-point papers, then that's your last 4 30-point papers, and that is irrespective of what institution that you did it at. Particularly in New Zealand, if you had your postgraduate study was overseas, there is a conversion for GPAs that you can pursue with the scholarship office, or talk to us about that. I won't go into that tonight. So moving into master's scholarships. This is for 1 year of full-time study or 2 years part-time, and most of our students do it in 2 years part-time. They remember that masters are graded just like a big assignment. PhDs are not graded. The grades that are awarded for a for a master's are significant in terms of whether you will get a PhD scholarship. So that's why the grades matter for a master's, but they don't really matter for a PhD, because after the PhD, it's not your grades that's really going to get you a job. It's going to be you demonstrating your research knowledge and skills and your content expertise. So remember I said there was masters by coursework that you could do or masters by thesis. You can get scholarships for both through the University of Otago, and it doesn't matter if you are a New Zealand resident or not. However, whether you're paying domestic or international fees, the scholarship is only $10,000 for a full-time student. So the masters by coursework, the scholarship is lower than it is for masters by thesis. So just bear that in mind. It's possibly because a master's by coursework is more bite-sized pieces, so there's a higher chance that you can work part-time. There is no stipend, which is I don't know why we say stipend, but it's the living allowance that comes with the scholarships, but there's no stipend for masters by coursework. There is a stipend included in the masters by thesis. So the main benefit of these scholarships is that your fees are waived. You don't pay any fees, and the fees, it's about $10,000 to complete a master's. It works out about the same as that $3,000 per paper, slightly less. Here we go. So 30 masters by coursework are awarded annually. This has increased recently. We don't hear good news like that recently at the moment, so that's great. You'd need a GPA of 8, so no A minuses. You can hold another scholarship at the same time, which is worth thinking about. And there's no additional categories for Māori or Pacific. My apologies for not using the hyphen on my A's for Māori in this presentation. For some reason, this slide that wouldn't allow it, this presentation as I was making it today. So there's a slightly different processes for getting masters by coursework. The department or a unit like the RTOU would nominate the student. So you would contact the RTOU, say I'm interested to apply for a scholarship. Would you nominate me? And we would do that. We would have a chat to you. Do you align well? We'll probably honestly know you quite well because you're one of our students that has done your earlier study with us. And we would be looking at your grades and making that assessment as well. Something to bear in mind with that. Now, remember that staircase idea that I showed you when we talked about certificate diploma? If you know you haven't done any postgrad study, you did really well at undergrad, you absolutely know that you want to go right through with the master's coursework, you can apply straight off the bat into a master's by coursework and apply for this scholarship. And if you have a grade point average of 8, you would be automatically awarded it. So that is something to think about. If things all go wrong and you decide, like, you know what, I met the man of my dreams or the woman of my dreams, we want to start a family, I don't want to do any more study or whatever, or just won lotto, you can then use the papers that you've completed and retrospectively get it awarded as a certificate, but or a diploma, depending on how many papers that you've done. So I hope you're following me there on that one. There is options there. So that's an exception to what I was just saying before about you don't tend to get scholarships for certificates and diplomas. That remains true, but you can enroll directly into a master's and essentially undertake that same pathway. Now, there's also another category for masters by thesis, 55 offered across the entire University of Otago, plus another 8 for international students. To give you an idea of the competition. I think I talk about that on the next slide, actually. Need to keep moving. So just working through this information, just let me know if you've got a specific question. It's entirely based on your grades, your GPA of 8 or higher. I've said here there's no panel. So with PhDs, if you're just below the GPA cutoff, it does go to a panel where the various aspects of all the students' cases are considered. GPA is one of those factors. The other thing the panel looks at is publications, the amount of support from your department, which is that you need to have a letter of support from the host department. So that would be the RTARU. And the alignment of your topic with the University of Otago's strategic goals. And the department person would help you with that. So let's say you did Rochelle's neurological rehabilitation paper, you really liked the way that she taught, you really wanted to do a thesis with her, you were to approach Rochelle, and together Rochelle would help you with writing that letter, and you submit that with your application to enroll. You can work up to 500 hours a year, and that includes 500 hours a year overall. And while you have a scholarship, so officially the scholarship is $18,200 plus your fees are waived. However, if you are enrolled part-time and you are a health professional, they won't award you the stipend. They will only offer you the fee waiver. And while we could make arguments there around equity with that quite easily, the reality is that they are trying to spread the limited money that they have as far as they can to give more students an opportunity. You can enroll part-time or full-time, and you can enroll at any time of the year. Apply for a master's thesis at any time of the year. Masters by coursework, well, because you're doing coursework and you're following the semesters, you'd normally apply at the start of each semester. And if you are on the Masters by thesis, and you happen to get another scholarship as well, because you're so fabulous, you can only get it up to a value of $9,000. So a PhD doctoral scholarship with the University of Otago, they have 400 apply for and 164 offered. That gives you a sense of the competition. Last year, 103 were auto-awarded and 200 were declined. So about a quarter of the applicants were funded. We will give you some advice. If you're that close in that pathway, we'll know you pretty well by then in the RTAU, and we'll give you some advice around your likelihood of success and some of the things that you can do to enhance your success. But the main thing that you can do, and I tell you that now before you've done anything with us, is publish in peer-reviewed literature. It is, partner with someone in an academic institution or someone who's already published. If you're helping out with a project, I really encourage you to insist that your name goes on the publication, or request that, and even negotiate that with some other, quid pro quo support in the publication. But your name on publications is significant in your opportunities, and some health professions or some disciplines have a strong tradition of doing that right from pre-professional training, and many of the allied health disciplines do not have that strong tradition, which means that we're kind of a wee bit behind the 8 ball with the amount of publications people will have by the time they're getting into post professional qualifications, project work, and that sort of thing. You need to be a little bit bolshy there and a little bit proactive about that to get yourself on a level playing field. So the scholarships have gone up recently. They've increased the amount to 32,500 stipend plus the fees waived at the domestic fee rate. So if you're paying international fees, they're only waiving the domestic side of it. The international fees are about double the domestic fee. So you'd still have to stump up with the rest of it as individually. You can do it part-time, full-time. You can apply at any time. They are actually evaluated quarterly, so you would find out, depending on when you applied, that's examined 3 times a year. And by and large, it doesn't matter what time of year you would apply. Personally, for a slightly stronger chance, I would aim for not the end of the year, because that's when most people are applying in order to get their funding in place for the start of next year. So obviously that might be what you'd like to do as well, get your funding situation in place for the start of next year, but there's a limited number that they have to give out. The more people that they are applying, the percentage chance of success is lower. But the key things, those grade indications that I gave you are fairly consistent at the same time. And the thing that will set you shoulders above someone else is publications and the letter of support from the department. So if you're not a straight A+ student in your postgraduate coursework, and I certainly wasn't, there are other, you may still be a really excellent candidate for a thesis pathway, and eminently capable of completing a thesis. I'd say anybody that's achieved a B+ average without too much trouble, but you went along, you did your best, you gave it a good shot, and you had a B+ average, you'd be quite capable of finishing a master's thesis and a PhD. The only reason that bar is so much higher for the scholarships is about the competition. So there are these other scholarships for specialty situations, which you can view there, and you can go to the Fees and Scholarships website at the University of Otago and plug in anything you can think of that makes you vaguely distinctive or describes your situation, and see if there's a scholarship there. But the ones that we have had students have success at are these ones here: the Fanny Evans for women returning to work, the Mason Jury for mental health and addiction with particular interest in Māori students, since Mason Jury was Māori and he funded it. And there's a Stanley Paris Award. Our coursework students have been successful in that if they then continue to study with the physiotherapy school. It's only for physiotherapists and only for musculoskeletal research. So the reason that this is also selective and niche is because people, wealthy people, bequest money for scholarships to pursue a topic that's of particular interest to them. That's where the bias or whatever the focus of these scholarships come from. So there are another couple of scholarships you might like to know about, if not now, for in the future. ACC has recently released a scholarship that closes in August. It opens in June every year. This was the first year they did it. They said that this is likely to be, their plan is that this is ongoing. And they just give you the money, $15,000 to use whatever way is most helpful to you. So for most of us, that would be fees, but if you've already got that covered or whatever, you can use that money to support your research. That is administered through the Universities New Zealand website. You might like to even keep an alert for that. There are not a huge number of options for rehabilitation, people with a typical rehabilitation background, but that is worth keeping an eye on. There's also the Health Research Council New Zealand, which is the main funder of health research in New Zealand, right up to multi-million-dollar projects. But they do have a range of career development awards that several of our graduates have been quite successful in gaining. For these awards, you usually need to partner with an academic institution or a research intensive group, which the RTAOU is. And so if this is of interest, do start some conversations about it. As you can see, the funding for them is really substantial. They'll cover your salary, whatever it is, plus $50,000 in research fees for 5 years. And one here in particular, the Clinical Research Training Fellowship, is really designed for a clinician to move into doing a PhD, is a really common pathway there. The idea is to keep clinicians, advanced clinicians in the clinical environment and support them to gain research skills and to undertake research on things that are relevant at the coalface. So that, of course, they are very competitive, and you are competing against professions such as medicine, who regularly publish from their undergrad. And so it's not uncommon that people would have 5+ publications when they're applying for the PhD scholarship, for example. And that's where I talk to you about thinking about, could we take this to peer-reviewed publication with any kind of project work that you're doing, any major assignment that you've done, for example, and any bit of research assistant help that you give, maybe a minor paid research assistant role. Ask that that authorship would be considered, or even insist. Guidelines, you can find the guidelines there on that link, or just Google the names of those awards. Those other ones I'm not going to talk to, Foxley, the Girders, and the Charles Hercus. They're for very specific situations, but not necessarily to support your master's or PhD, but those are other ones that are available for you to have a look through. Now, the other option for thesis scholarships is through your supervisor. So through an academic who has won, for example, a large HRC grant, and in that they have capacity to take on a master's or PhD student. So I'm involved in a couple of those at the moment, and will soon be looking for an occupational therapist with to undertake a master's project. I say OT because the nature of that project makes it really just amenable to an occupational therapist. So these kinds of things do come up every now and then. If you join us on Facebook, follow us on Facebook, you will be notified when we're seeking expressions of interest of it. We do pay particular attention to our own graduates, only because we know them really well by the time they've been through our course. So, they're a safer bet, and we know what they've learned. Just a wee word about the scholarships. That I said,
just interrupt your flow a little bit. Rachel Saunders says, I'm an OT.
No, Rachel Saunders. Okay, note taken. Drop me a line, Rachel. There's specialty scholarships. I've mentioned those other ones before, but there are other ones available for women. I just put a couple of pluses there to indicate to you the number of scholarships related to different things. So there's one related to physio, for example. If you're not a physio, sorry, Rachel, and others, the reason I've only got physios there is because physio is taught in the University of Otago. So that's where a scholarship has been offered. You could approach your own professional training institutions to see if they have got some scholarships, but we'd really like you to come study with us. There are some other ones for women for different areas, maybe not really that well aligned, like chemistry, for example. So that's why I didn't talk to it in depth. Medicine, there are a lot of scholarships. If you happen to have done a medical degree, and now, or there are a lot of scholarships that you could apply for, because a lot of doctors have made bequests for scholarships, and there are quite a lot for Māori and Pacifica as well. And check out your professional associations or any other professional networks. Physiotherapy New Zealand, Paediatric Special Interest Group often provide funding support for postgraduate study, for example. Occupational Therapy New Zealand has a research and education fund that might be able to support. And there are specialty clinical groups like the Motor Neuron Disease New Zealand, have the Neuromuscular Research Fund, and they have a $5,000 scholarship to support PhD students doing research in a neuromuscular area. So there's things like that, and I couldn't possibly provide you a comprehensive list of those, but those are some of the options. And of course, your employer, selling it to them that it's a valuable thing to fund. Once you're enrolled, if you need some financial support for unexpected circumstances, there is the Putai Fund. It is somewhat limited. They're not going to cover all your living costs for a year, but it's worth asking. So there are some things like that the university really does try. In terms of a timeline, from the middle of the year, start approaching your managers for funding, hearing funding options and starting to do your research. 10th of December, around about the 10th of December or the Friday of that week, second week of December is when enrollments close for the following year. So if you don't want to have to pay a late fee, well, it's only about $150 or something, but still you could go out for dinner with that. Get in there early, remember to enroll early. That applies for coursework. So thesis, you can enroll at any time, whether that's master's or PhD, and you start at the start of the month. You start paying at the start of the month, so you might as well start studying at the start of the month. And then also start to approach, if you're thinking thesis, approach the supervisor from the middle of the year and saying, have you got capacity to take on myself as a student next year? I'm interested in starting whatever in February. And just negotiate that. If you haven't gone through your coursework with us and we don't know your performance academically, we might set you some tasks to demonstrate your academic ability. Before you enroll, you need to, or as you enroll in a thesis, you need to submit a short proposal, 2 to 4 pages, outlining the scope of what you plan to do. And you usually do that with a little bit of exchange with your thesis supervisor who's coming on board with you, but you are expected to sort of start that. So really the university is wanting to assess, are you a good fit for this department? Do you have the resources to be able to do what you're hoping to be able to do? And is this about the right size to be a successful master's or PhD? Not too big, not too small. That's really about supporting you to make a successful choice there. Within the RTAU, we would approve that proposal. We might give you some recommendations to modify it, and you should be enrolled and ready to start in Feb. And for the Otago scholarships, you simply tick a box at the time you enroll. And ideally, you know that information about whether you're successful with the scholarship at the time that you go to start. A few helpful links, and then that's it from me, really. And tonight's presentation, thanks for staying on board an extra couple of minutes. We have you some extra stuff for free. I'm going to stop the recording now, but open to questions. Do drop us a line if you are interested in studying with us. Remember, we're here to help and look forward to supporting you on your thesis journey.
Thanks, everyone. As Fee said, just email us at any time with any questions. We're really happy to answer people's questions and to talk about your specific situations.